What's up? So today, the Heard household is here in Loch Solier, which is just north of Houston, the event site, and we are all teaching classes. I'm going to do mine live. It's a little bit easier for me to do it that way, and also you guys can see how it is just a live class. The rest of everybody else is recording their classes, so we're going to have a website up soon to be able to get all those up, along with our handouts and a lot of them. So anyway, nobody showed for my class this morning, so I'm going to just teach it to you. Alright, so the class today is for your smaller bodied fighters, specifically vertically challenged. And so what we're talking about is the body mechanics in specific. When it comes to a smaller fighter, smaller fighters are taught the exact same way as any other fighter until we start seeing some of the way the body moves and the angles in which the body has to throw our shots and defend from taller opponents. A lot of times when you're short, if you're short enough, like I am 5'3", if you are that short, then what ends up happening is most of my opponents are 6 feet or taller. And so when they're that tall, almost all of my shots have to be a rising shot for anything above the head. And so as you can imagine, that ends up using a lot of difference from somebody who is equal height, which all your shots can be straight here. And then if I was taller, fighting a shorter opponent, then all my shots would be coming down. So the angle of which you throw your shots is completely different a lot of times. The way you have to throw it across your body in order to generate power is a little different. And then on top of that, most of the larger fighters, not necessarily tall, but larger, more muscular, more powerful fighters, they're able to either simply throw with just their shoulder and no body movement at all, or depending upon who you learn from, they throw with a rotation. And that single rotation without engaging the shoulder, without really engaging your core, is what they are putting all of their mass behind. They have enough mass and strength to kind of carry it through. The other type that you'll see is people who have enough mass and strength to they don't engage a shoulder, they don't do a twist, they're able to just arm it in. So you'll see really strong people be able to do this. One of the few people we have in our kingdom that can do it without shoulder engagement, core, or anything is Sir Ragnar. So sometimes you'll see him get in a weird position. He just arms it in there, and it is incredibly good because he's strong enough to do it. But if you're smaller, that's not going to be an option. You could, of course, try it, but because of the fact that we have to hit with a sufficient force, that's just not going to be good. So as you are learning as a small fighter, you'll learn just arm, and you'll be like, oh, well, I touched somebody, but I didn't really hit them hard enough. And the reason why is because you're not engaging all of your body and throwing the shot with the proper mechanics. So let's talk about what is a smaller body fighter. So what is a smaller fighter? Smaller fighter can be either somebody who is really short, like 5'3". Typically anything that's 5'7", 5'9", and shorter, that's kind of on the smaller side. The smaller you are, the more you're going to have to kind of make up and adjust your body mechanics. And then not only can you be small as in I'm short, but you can also be small as in I am really tiny and have no muscle mass. There are people who cannot put on a lot of muscle mass, but do have a height advantage, and so they have to also use some of these mechanics, but they get to do it kind of from a down perspective or equal perspective. So it's getting a little bit different from them. So the next thing is that we don't talk a lot about is arm length. So everybody looks at me and they're like, oh, you're 5'3", but you should have a certain amount of arm length with that. And the reality of it is that I don't. So not only am I short, but my wingspan, this from here to here, is actually shorter by 2 inches than my height. So I have a negative wingspan. It's called an apex or a something. I don't know. I try to ignore it because I have a negative one. Most people have an equal or positive. So if you are a tall fighter, but you have a negative, then you're going to have a little bit different range. And if you're a short fighter, but you have a positive one, then you can make up some of your height in range with your arms. Unfortunately, I am blessed to have both short arms and be short. So for my instance, I have to be very technical, and not only do I have to be technical, but I have to have very, very, very specific and good body mechanics and range control and everything else. So it's not that a taller fighter necessarily has advantages. They do to some degree starting off. But a lot of times taller, larger fighters end up not training as hard. They end up not doing the technical work. They end up not focusing on their body mechanics because, well, I mean, it's easy. I just do this and that's it. Whereas smaller fighters have to. And so what you end up seeing is on the bell curve of if you're training equally, what you see is you'll see everybody, we're kind of going this way, and then what'll happen is your taller fighter will kind of get better faster than your shorter fighter, but then they'll plateau, and the shorter fighter is going to eventually kind of comes up like this, meet in the middle. The reason for that is, like I said, you are learning so much technical at the beginning where a lot of times they don't do that. And so it takes you a little bit longer to get up there, but then you do supersede them because they're going to hit a plateau as soon as they hit that. And so that's the reason why a lot of times you'll see disparity in I'm not as good a fighter as somebody who started at the same time as me, is putting in the same amount of work as I am and doing as much as I am. That can happen at the beginning. So be patient, keep training, and you will get there. That's kind of one of the other things that I talk about is that it doesn't matter how small, short, whatever you are, you can make it in this combat sport. And you can be effective, you can get all the way to knighthood, and we've seen people who are short even become crowned multiple times. So your height and size does not determine how far you can get in this combat sport. How much you can work on it, how much dedication you put into it, how much training you're able to do, and your physical limitations is what is going to determine that. I've also seen people who are older that have done perfectly well. We have plenty of people who were smaller fighters that were like 50, 60, still got knight. So even though age does play a little bit of a part in it, it's not going to stop you from reaching that goal if that's what you want. So the next thing is pros, which we kind of talked a little bit about, but the pro for being short, a lot of people are like, there's no pro. I'm like, oh, there's a little bit of one. And that is because I am short, and most of the people I fight are taller than me. So upside for me is I know my angle is going to be like this. So essentially, this is the angle that I have to worry about. If somebody is taller than me, they have to worry about everything, right? Whereas me, most of the angles of the shots are going to come down, unless they really drop their hand. If they really drop their hand, then, well, just make the pay for it, right? But that is one of the benefits, is you already know kind of the angle from the down, from up to down, that it's going to come. The next part that, strangely enough, is a positive, is that you are not taken seriously. A lot of us who are small, in height, stature, everything else, we aren't taken seriously on the field at all. They'll look at it and be like, oh, well, it's just a small person. They can't hurt me. They can't do anything. You know, they're not going to be fast. They're just whatever. And then, you know, so they don't take you seriously. Make them pay for that. And I definitely want to. That doesn't mean rush in and get all up in their face. That means go ahead and use that to your advantage. If somebody's being dismissive of you, then just F them up. I mean, don't feel bad about it. And if they talk crap about it, or about you at first, or they're belittling you, make them pay for it on the field. And if you can't make them pay for it on the field right now, train harder, and then you will be able to later. It gives you fuel to get better. Haha, yes, surprise. So, melee benefits. One of the things that I've noticed is a lot of smaller fighters aren't necessarily interested in tournaments, and I think that's a cultural thing more than anything, but we'll get to that. But they love melees. I love melees. I think they're great. I have a great time in them. There's nothing better than fighting in a melee with a whole bunch of people around you. And so the thing is with melee is you're like, but you're short, so what are you going to do? You're just going to stand in the shield wall and just kind of stand there. And the problem is that with my body mass, no, that's not really a great utilization for my size or skill. So instead, I end up fighting a lot of spear, which is great. The only time I fight in a line is if I need to be in front and there are people spearing that want to spear over me. So as a short person in a line, as long as I have people behind me to keep a shield press, then what I can have is people that can fire arrows over me and they can do spear work around me. I fight with a center grip a lot of times so that I can move from left to right depending upon if the person's left-handed or right-handed. Right, exactly. The next thing is that people don't see you a lot of times in melees. So if you're on a flanking or a hunting group, like Carl there said, then a lot of times you get missed in the crowd. And you can get in the backfield, you can do all kinds of really cool, fun stuff. And so being smaller on the melee field isn't necessarily a bad thing. The only other thing that I end up doing a lot more of is, because I'm so small, I don't get hit with arrows, I don't get speared a lot, I get missed so much, so often. I end up being our commander, because nobody hits me, nobody touches me. So I'm able to keep an eye out for everybody, tell them when it's good to go punch the hole, good to flank, advance, stay, so forth. And because I can see the whole field from a back view. So those are kind of the good things about being in melee. I'm sure there's many more. Those are just the ones that I like. So cons. Cons is the majority of the time you're fighting higher than horizontal. And what that means is you have to lift your, which I can't do with my right arm right now, but you have to lift your shots up. And so if I'm having to lift my shots up constantly, that puts a lot of strain in here and in my arm. It also requires muscle mass in here that most smaller fighters, especially if you're thin, do not have that muscle mass. So you have to really work and build up that muscle and that muscle group before you can really get sufficient force. So again, when you're starting off, you're having a hard time getting people to call blows. It's not just your body mechanic that you will have to work out. You are going to have to lift weights. You are going to have to gain muscle mass. If that is just something that is completely, not what you want to do, then you have to understand that you're not going to be hitting with sufficient force in most kingdoms. So next con. Loss of attack range. So again, if I'm short and I have a negative wingspan, which is what I have, then I have a loss of attack range. And that's problematic in that my opponent, more often than not, can hit me and I cannot hit them in a transitional step. So I have to be very careful about that, and I have to work really, really, really hard on my foot control, my range, and my voids. And I have to be very aware of where my body is in space and against where my body is in their space. So a lot of footwork is needed and everything else. As you can tell, it's just a lot more work. The next part is potentially strength issues, which we kind of covered there. You have to. There's just no way to get around it. The next part is being technically sound. So I talked about that at the beginning. If you're a shorter, smaller fighter, Pastor Brian's here. He's listening to me, thankfully, not just you guys. So if you are a smaller fighter, you have to be very technically sound. Without that, you're gonna find that it's gonna be very difficult for you. Your progression is gonna be very slow, much slower than someone of the same size. And so the next part is dismissive attitudes, kind of reduction of respect on the field, and so forth. And so this is something that is very frustrating. I know a lot of my smaller fighters are going to be women or presenting as women who are small, and just culturally, a lot of times you'll find you're being dismissed. It's very frustrating. It's very easy to get discouraged. It's very easy to say, well, I'm not a good fighter and I'm a woman, what do I have to contribute? Nobody will learn from me other than maybe other women. And the reality of it is that, and I have had to learn this very recently from Sir Helga, is that you have to take your space and you have to own it and not be shy of it. Some people may take that the wrong way. Some people may get upset about it, and honestly, that's on them, and that's a them problem, not a you problem. So if you have something that you know and you can give back and you want to teach it. If you are being dismissed on the field and you're not getting where you want to be, then go out there and take it, or find somebody that will help you get there. There are plenty of people out there within your kingdom, outside of your kingdom if you need it, that want you to succeed because they just love seeing fighters succeed. So if you're not getting what you need from your local area, reach outside of it. It's totally okay to do that. Yeah, exactly. So virtual space opened up a lot during the pandemic. You are now seeing so many people do virtual training sessions where, like, I know we do virtual training sessions where people are like, hey, I need to work on this. We'll have them literally come into our Discord or live stream or whatever, and we'll watch them pel and tell them, give them critique of like, no, it needs to be like this, while we're also like on a camera. So virtual training is a real thing. It's not quite as good as being in person, but it is an amazing tool. You should definitely use it. Don't feel like you are stuck in the teachers that are in your area, because you are not. Seek outside help. It's totally acceptable. You are not, but there's no sort of cultural thing where I have to learn from the knights in my practice or in my kingdom. That's not necessarily true. You can learn from anybody. And don't feel afraid to ask somebody. The worst thing they're going to say is, no, I don't have time right now. Most people, if you ask them, will say yes. And if they don't, they might be able to say, hey, here's another person that has time that can help you out. The next part is changes to fundamental basics of mechanics due to size and height. So this is where we start getting into, well, what's the difference in the body mechanics? So a lot of people tell me, I don't know how to teach a woman. I don't know how to teach a smaller fighter. It's a problem. It's terrible. I just don't feel comfortable doing it because I don't know what to do. So I'm going to tell you exactly what to do here, and this is very key. You're going to teach them exactly the same way you taught everyone else of your students. You're just going to change a little bit of the body mechanics to fit their body, which you had to do for every single one of your other students, unless you aren't able to do that. If you aren't able to change and adjust your fighting style and what you are doing to fit your student, then to be quite honest, you should really work on your teaching skills. Sorry, not sorry. So let's talk about body mechanics. If I'm a short person, right, I have to do it left-handed, my right arm is a little too barred. So if I'm a short person, my body can't, most guys, when they throw their shots, when they're throwing their shots, they're here, they're able to just throw it across their body. Well, for me, I'm a woman, so I have these boobs in the way. It doesn't matter how much I squish them, they're still going to be there. So because of that, what I end up doing is I can't cross my body across this way, whereas a lot of the guys can. Some men also cannot due to either, right, larger individuals in width. Also, you'll have people who have shoulder injuries that cannot cross their body this way for one reason or another. So instead, what we're going to do is we're simply going to lift the elbow a little bit higher, and we're going to bring it across our body now. So your elbow isn't stopped by this. Your elbow is now able to cross your body. So the other thing you'll do is now, if I'm doing it like everybody else does in our group, I'm doing it across here and my hand stays parallel. That's not able, once you get up here, you can't really stay parallel. So once I'm here, my shot is now going to be turned just slightly down. So what that ends up meaning is that everything throws from here. But the problem is that if you are a small fighter with small mass, you do not have the mass to throw this. Mass Brian here won't have this problem. You have plenty behind you could throw straight from the shoulder and not need everything else. However, the rest of us who are very small in size of physicality and not very strong, we have to use also, we'll be told, oh, you have to use this hip. And the way that's taught more often than not is to rotate on this axis right here. All right, so you're in your stance. We teach a wide stance, but if you're in your stance, you're rotating on this hip. And then that's how I generate using my mass and my hip through my body in here. And they keep it very straight in here. The problem ends up being is that, as depending upon your stance, is that when you go to rotate, you are pointing your shoulders away from your opponent. So if my opponent's right here and I rotate, I'm now going this way. So now I have to rotate, and yet I have to correct my arm and throw it. And for some of us, that's just not possible. So what do we do instead? What we do instead is something I also learned in the past year, and that is Duke Rommelser showed me a little bit of it, and I was working on it, and then Sir Helga corrected it and helped me out with it to kind of refine it. But instead of rotating, you are simply going to take this hip, which is unrotated, and you're just going to pop it forward. All that does, all that little hip wiggle, which if you've done the dance, you should be very good at this. What that does is it starts the mechanic from your leg up through here. Then, from here, you'll tighten your core, and then that's when you gauge the shoulder behind it. And again, it's not across your body, which you will see in a lot of these other classes that the rest of my group is was teaching, it's a little bit higher, and there you go. So we have to engage our whole body in the right way. And if I'm engaging my whole body this way, and I'm not using my shoulder, and I'm not really doing anything with my core, it's not going to be very effective because you don't have enough mass or size to put behind it. If I'm doing only the shoulder, which is what you will see later on, isolation, I don't have enough strength in my shoulder in order to throw. So I have to use both, but I can't do a full turn. If I do a full turn, everything goes over here. And so it's here. It's a very small movement. It takes a really long time to get good at. But utilizing all of that in that way and in the right way will be able to make it to where not only if you are even smaller than me, you could throw sufficiently hard enough in almost every kingdom, but you could also, be able to start throwing shots from not just a static position. So as we're learning, we're throwing at the Appel, we're throwing from a static position. When you're fighting, you are not throwing at a static position. You are constantly moving. And so it's very easy to get all kinds of out of sorts. Proper body mechanics and training, you learn how to throw from those positions with this whole force. So it does take quite a lot longer to learn than a tall person just swinging or somebody who's doing this, because this is not as difficult to do. You have to have very good body awareness. Next thing. So more often than not, what you're going to end up changing for your student, if they are smaller, is not really because they're small, but because of their physical limitations they have. So when I look at somebody and I'm teaching them, such as Master Brian here, so when I'm teaching him, like, okay, he is a little bit taller than me, so he's going to have a range problem just by his height. Next thing I'll do is see how long his arms are, and they're fine. They're not necessarily short. He is physically in stature, has mass, so mass will not be a problem. So really what I'm looking at is height and then mobility. So by looking at him, I can tell he probably has some mobility issues, and then instead of just assuming that, I'm going to say, hey, Master Brian, do you happen to have mobility issues?
I have no cartilage in my right knee.
So he has no cartilage in his right knee. So when we're training Master Brian, we're going to adjust our body mechanics for someone who is down here-ish, who has mass, but cannot do the range and footwork movement that we want. So he's going to have to learn to be a very static fighter. And he's going to have to learn how to be very defensive and make people come to him. So right there then, I just changed a whole basic theory of how we would teach Master Brian versus random average person. And that's all you're going to do with a smaller person, a woman, or anybody else. Same thing. It's not that different, honestly. I really wish people would be less afraid of especially teaching women or anyone who is non-binary or transgender or anything like that. Please just let go, teach them. They need it. It's one of the biggest problems that we have in the community of female fighters specifically is we cannot get people to train us and to take us seriously in our training. And it's really, really frustrating. So if you feel like you can contribute and you can train female fighters, train them. And do it in a way in which you would train any other student. Unless they say, hey, I have this or that going on, then obviously make adjustments as you need. I really wish people would be a little bit less hesitant about that. So those are just some basic body mechanics. A lot of times, if I have somebody here, we'll look at their body mechanics and I'll adjust them a little bit. I just have Master Brian here, and his is easy to adjust. So for Master Brian, what we would end up doing, he has to be a very static fighter. He has a knee problem. So with that knee problem, we won't be able to do this stance. So a lot of people stand like this, very long, right? Well, the problem is if you have rotation, you're putting a lot of strain on your knee. On the front one, and if I get it this way, I'm putting even more strain on this. So he cannot fight that way. He will destroy whatever is left of his knee, or he won't be able to fight at the end of the day because his knee will hurt so bad. So instead for Master Brian, we will do a wider stance that is very straightforward. So we're going to take you don't have to go quite as wide, just a little bit, probably about there. So some of us, we have to go a lot wider, some of us a little more narrow. We have to figure that out. It takes a little play. So do a wider stance for him. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at it and be like, okay, you unfortunately aren't going to be able to move a whole lot. So what we're going to really work on is, instead of this big rotation, is for you, because of your mass and the fact that you have a lot of upper body strength in comparison to the rest of your body, you're going to use only your shoulder isolation, and that's where we'll start with teaching you. So for him, I would teach shoulder isolation. So what that does, his knee doesn't have to move. His hips don't have to move on his body. And that keeps him in a centered position, so that if he has to step to move at all, he's easy for him to step, because his body down here is never out of position. Now, the question becomes, yeah, but is he really going to be able to hit hard enough? Oh yeah, 100%. Not only is he going to be able to hit hard enough, but because he doesn't have to worry about the rotation in it, he can throw from almost any angle, as long as he learns how to step and how to move appropriately for his physicality in his feet. So for Master Brian, I'll tell you how to do the shoulder mechanic real quick. You'll be able to learn this from another place. Shoulder isolation is, if I have my arm here, left, and you feel your shoulder. Now what I want you to do is take your hand and pull it back. Just pull it back, right? Using the elbow, pull it back. So you feel that shoulder back there, how it tightens and tenses? Okay, so that's what we want. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take, when we go forward, we're going to take our elbow, and our elbow is going to go before our hand. Our elbow is going to go before hand, and then not across our body. We're going to bring it up just slightly above. There you go, and there you go. That is it. And that is a mechanic that you learn right there. Yep. So, and I'm going to show you exactly what.
It's working the other side too.
Huh?
It's working the other side too.
It does. It works your whole body, all your upper body. So I'm going to show you what we're doing with Master Brian here. Hey, Master Brian. This is Master Brian, who I've been talking to this whole time. So now we're going to show you exactly what I just said. So he is in a wide stance. He's not straight. He's not track star or anything else. Very wide. And he's going to take his arm and cross it exactly what I just told him. So first, pull it back with the elbow. So you feel that muscle engage. Excellent. And then forward and up. Yep, exactly. And then from there, if he wants to release, may I touch you?
Yes.
Right? If he wants to release and have it go forward, he just has to, exactly. So he's done some. What we don't want to do is this elbow bend right here. We don't mind turning this a little bit on the mass front. This elbow bend right here, we don't ever want this to be straight. Otherwise, you will tear up your elbow. You'll cause tendinitis of your elbow and a lot of shoulder issues. So you always want a bend when you finish your shot. So that is what we would adjust for Master Brian right there. Just in that quick little thing. And now you're like, oh, well, that's so easy. No, he'll probably have to spend about 3 months pelling 2-3 times a week and fighting once a week in order to be able to make that work for him.
So with doing just the shoulder isolation, how much should we be aware of things like slap tears?
Right. So shoulder isolation and injuries. You're very prone to them. So what I would say is, if you are going to do full shoulder isolation like that and work on that, that you need to be very aware that you can tear your rotator cuff, slap tears, all kinds of things, bicep tears can happen. That's one of the reasons why we say don't straighten your arm fully. The other thing you need to do is stretch, like a lot. You're going to have to do a lot of stretches pre, after, and then you're also going to have to build those shoulder muscles up, because if you are overworking this muscle, the muscle fails, and the only thing that's going to make you throw is your tendon. And then once you start depending only on your tendon to throw, then that's when your shoulder starts failing, and will rip apart. We don't want to get to that point. A couple of people have in our group, but it was from weightlifting, not fighting. Thank you. But I recommend a lot of stretching, and there are specific stretches that you need to do for your rotator cuff. I do not have those with me, but I could definitely post those so that everybody will know. I know Hari was teaching a stretching class right now, and in that class he goes over a lot of rotator cuff stretches. But stretch before you fight, stretch after you fight, stretch every day. Most of us stretch every day. We've replaced one of our workouts with just a full big stretching session at the house. So that is what I 100% recommend. Also, if it hurts, stop. Take a break. It's okay to take a couple weeks off. So if you're like, man, my shoulder feels a little funny, or it's crunchy, or it kind of hurts, do not fight with an injury or a cut. Do not do it. You are going to tear everything up worse. You're going to make it more inflamed. Don't be dumb like me, because that's what I did.
I guess the concern is understanding the difference in your own body between soreness and hurt.
Right, and you are the only person that can do that. So if I was, for instance, for some reason, I was your teacher, and I was pushing you because that's my job, is to make you motivated. The problem would be is that I don't know your physical limitations and how much pain and what you are feeling. You have to be able to communicate that to your teacher, and you are responsible for your own physical health. So if somebody's pushing you and pressuring you, tell them to fuck off. Sorry, F-bomb, live with it. But if it hurts, don't do it. And if somebody's pressuring you, they're not a good teacher then. They may say, hey, one more, just like, look, I really can't. And, take care of your body, because you only get one of them.
If at any point in time you say, that hurts, and your teacher doesn't say, all right, how do we change this? Consider a new teacher.
Yeah, 100%. So if it's constantly hurting when you're doing something and your teacher isn't adjusting for that, then I would definitely take a break from that teacher.
As long as you're communicating that with them.
You should definitely communicate. Communication is key if you haven't noticed. And a lot of this is me asking the student questions, not just looking at them and deciding, but also asking him questions. Obviously, I can look at a student, size them up a little bit, and know what needs to be changed, but then I need to have a full conversation with them. Hey, what are your physical limitations? How much time do you have to invest in this? How do you like to learn? How do you like to, fight? Just a full conversation. Get to know the person. You can't just walk up to somebody and go, okay, I'm good. I know exactly how to teach you, and I know exactly what you need. That's just not the case. So a lot of times when we get into big classes, we try to be very general with things, but when you get one-on-one, you should be able to flex all that and help people. 100%. Thank you. That was a good question. I didn't have that on there. So the next thing is psychology of being a smaller person. So one of the things that we don't address a lot, especially in this combat sport, is psychology of the sport and fighting. So there's kind of two different things. If I'm just a smaller fighter psychology, then obviously it's a little overwhelming to have, tree giants hulking, powering down at me, swinging with a glaive. That's like, oh God, fear. So fear of being injured and fear of being hurt is something that it's very easy for a small fighter to fall victim to, and to get stuck in their head and not be able to perform either in a tournament, a melee, or even at practice. So that is something that a lot of us smaller fighters have to overcome, especially in the beginning, that a lot of people do not recognize and they don't account for when they have a new fighter who is smaller, or a fighter that's coming in that's smaller that hasn't had a teacher to help them kind of work through those things. The next thing is a lack of confidence. So I can almost guarantee you that the vast majority of smaller fighters, especially women fighters, have a serious lack of confidence on the field and in their skills. And Master Brian said he's had some female students before, so I'm sure you've had to kind of face this as well. And that confidence, when you do start to show it, a lot of times people want to push it back down, especially if you're a woman. And that's a cultural thing. And the reality of it is that to be out here on the field and to dominate another person and to hit them and to win, I have to have some sort of confidence. Without that, I'm hindering myself. Now, your teacher will help you find your confidence. Most of them will. But in the end, you have to figure out what is it that I need to do to be more confident. Do I need to wear a certain color? Do I need to do, a hop skip? Do I need to, have somebody, do a pickup fight with me, really slow work? Like, what do I need to be confident when I walk out there on the field? For me, in order for me to be confident on the field, I literally, it's going to sound weird, but I kind of do what actors and a lot of show performers do. That's because I have a lot of anxiety. And so what I do is I literally turn off myself and I turn on my other self in my brain. So my real name is Lori, and so Lori goes over here in a box of anxiety and confidence issues and everything else, whereas Antigone comes out and is like, okay, I'm here to fuck you up. I've got all the confidence in the world, and I'm able to kind of force myself to do it that way. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for a lot of stage performers. I think like Beyonce has a couple of different other people. They'll say, oh, I have this character that I put on. It's kind of the same way for me. And honestly, I didn't learn that until I was crowned and had to stand up in front of 300 people and talk with terrible stage fright and vomiting. So
no pressure.
No pressure. And so it's like, oh, you have to go talk in front of people with no script, no nothing. Here you go, good luck. And they're all staring at you, and you're like, ah! So So I had to learn very quickly how to handle that and how to stand in front of 300 people and confidently speak. And that was how I went around it. Unfortunately, I was kind of throwing the fire to do it, but hopefully you have time to perfect that. The last thing that is small fighters' perspective, but more female fighters' perspective, is a lot of times we are taught that we need to be super aggressive and run into a fight, like, oh, get in there. And that's not helpful. That is a terrible way to teach, and it's not great. There are times and places when it's great to pose really fast and get really close to somebody, but vast majority of the time as a shorter person, that A range, which is like core to core, will do you no favors, because you are suddenly, the person is tall and you have to bring all your defense all the way up here in order to block. And so, and this up here, I am just not strong enough to be able to do that. I'm much stronger here with my core, right? So I don't necessarily like being in A range a lot as a smaller person. Can I be? Sure. Do I know what to do? Most of the time. But the reality of it is I have to know exactly how far and what I need to do in that position. So if somebody's telling you, hey, as a smaller fighter, the best thing, or as a girl, you just run in there and just be really aggressive and you just get in their face. Please understand that's not technique, that's not anything. That's just trying to get up there and surprise the person because maybe they're dismissing you. That's not really going to work for any length of time. And as soon as people find out you're an aggressive fighter and that's what you want to do, they're going to love it because you are literally feeding yourself to them. It is fast food delivery. So please don't go with that. So then what do? Well, we have to learn where our range is and the best spot for us. There's obviously ranges, which I'm going to go through later, and everything else, but you have to be very careful with that. The other problem we end up getting is if you're a small fighter, I'm sure most of you who know me have heard me called the ball of hate, and that's not because I'm a hateful person. I'm not. I'm actually supposedly a kind person, but it's because when I'm on the field, I'm so aggressive. And a lot of people assign that aggressive and that confidence on the field to off the field for me. And it really became problematic. And so you have to be wary of how do I balance that? How do I balance my confidence, my aggressiveness, and taking my space without becoming this person who is a bitch, who is, an asshole, who is just mean or hateful or anything else. And there's a balance there. Especially as a woman, if you're culturally not acting feminine, then a lot of people take it in a negative way. So we have to combat a lot of that. Most men do not, and so a lot of men end up not understanding that. It's something we have to deal with. So they're like, oh, well, you just go out there, you just beat them up, and you just tell them, you're like, huh, how'd you like that, bitch, And the problem is that as a woman, if I did that to Master Brian would be like, Tiggy, you're being an asshole. I thought we were cool. Why are you being an asshole, right? But if one of the bros did it, like, hey, he'd be like, oh yeah, we're cool. So
no, that still hurt me.
It still hurt his feelings. But you will find culturally that it's treated differently. So just understand that is probably going to happen to you. And that's not necessarily a you problem. It's the cultural problem. It could be a you problem. You could be too much and need to dial it back a little bit because you've taken it too far. But before you do that, talk to a mentor, talk to other female fighters, get their perspective, and help them, have them help you understand how it works. The female fighter community here in Antigone is getting stronger. A lot of us are talking, we are working together, we are all supporting each other and trying to make it a much friendlier and supportive environment where everybody has what they need. So hopefully you find that here in Antigone. Hopefully you have that in your kingdom. If you don't, I'm more than happy to talk to you about how to build that. And I'm sure there's lots of other female fighters out there that are happy to help you as well. So with that finishes the class for today. Master Brian, do you have any last questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Good, lots to think about.
Lots to think about. And it's recorded, so you can go back and listen to me ranting about being short. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. We're going to end a couple minutes early since I didn't have any questions from anybody. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I have 2 more classes I'm going to live stream here shortly. They're going to be, I have lane and quadrant introduction next, and then lunch break and tournament mindset preparation. So that's what I'll have on my Facebook here in a little while. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope it helped you. Oh, and as always, if you have any questions, you want a handout, you want to talk about anything I've discussed in this class, just PM me on Facebook, Antigone, New York, or you can email me, duchess@antigone@gmail.com. So, thank you.